Making connections over 200 episodes won't be easy. Join me on this journey of conversation where I connect with those people that have gotten me this far so I can go even farther. This is the Dependent Independent Podcast, and this is a MiniSode. Hey there, everyone. Thank you for downloading and listening to MiniSode 64 and a half of the Dependent Independent Podcast. I'm your host, Nick G., and this is a podcast about making connections, looking back while moving forward. Usually, around this time of the podcast, I kind of go through the spiel about what I'm doing, my purpose of these minisodes, but screw it, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm kind of going through another metamorphosis, but not so much a metamorphosis of changing into something, but kind of reverting back. Next month, the weekend of the 8th and 9th of September, I have an opportunity to speak at the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Convention in Swedesboro, New Jersey, and the cool thing about it is I am speaking about authenticity in creativity. And did I mention I was Nick G? And this is a podcast about making connections? Yeah, I did. If this is your first time listening to this mini-sode, this can be a weird one. Go back and listen to our past episodes. Pretty much, one thing that's really great about my podcast is because it's this journey to 200 episodes, people, when they download them, or at least every day, from 300 to 300 people, it can be the range of how many people listen or download the show. They start at the beginning. They download everything, which is great. All my whole series, and you can listen to it from the time I just started this thing all the way up till now. And we have a long way to go to 200. And I wanted to change things up a bit. I wanted to take a little pivot. But I'm speaking at this Mid-Atlantic Podcast Convention about authenticity. And you know, when I come up here and I go through my spiel and I tell you what it's all about. For those new listeners, subscribe to the show, because when these shows post I still do it though. I still go through my housekeeping. Subscribe to the show so at midnight every Monday night, these hit your feed so you don't miss one episode of me talking about my life and what's happening all the way up to episode 200. It's going to be awesome when we hit 200 in 6-7 years from now. But I can't wait, and I'm glad you're part of this journey. But real quick, these are mini-sodes. These are just kind of bumpers between my full episodes where I really usually have co-hosts on and we talk, and I'm sure my audience who's familiar with it, you've heard me on those shows. And on those shows, I make connections. And I use that word a lot, making connections. Not just, I don't even call them guests, I call them co-hosts, because they contribute as much as I would to the show, sometimes even more, which is great, because then I can actually take a back seat and let them drive it, which is awesome. So one thing that I wanted to talk about is in making those connections. My wife and I were having a cocktail earlier this weekend, the weekend that just passed, and we were talking, getting caught up because the kids are crazy. They're all getting ready to go back to school, and Meg's getting ready to go back to work, which, if you listened last year, it was Meg and her friend Maureen, her coworker or co-teacher. They teach at the same school, Maureen. They talked about going back to school, and it's a really crazy time in the house, even though my summer kind of stays the same throughout the 3 months, 2.5 months, because I go to work every 5 days a week. Now their schedule's changing, excuse me, and, gross, sorry, real life here, sorry, excuse me, and the same thing happens every year, so we're kind of in that week where I think Meg has to go back to work this week, the kids are going back to school next week, it's Labor Day weekend coming up, but in approaching the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Convention and connecting with people that I met last year, one of the, or let me go back, I'm sorry, I'm going too fast, Meg had said to me, we were talking about the podcast and making sure I keep all this time in check, because I want to make sure that this isn't pulling away. Sometimes it does, pulling me away from what I should be doing, because I have so much fun doing this, but I really need to make it, it's not who I am, it's part of what I do. So she asked, would you still podcast if people stop listening and downloading? And it made me suddenly kind of hit the brakes and go, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Why do I put every week? Tonight Megan had her teacher, or her actually dance moms over. They were hanging out. Yes, the dance moms do exist. They're outside partying. My dishwasher's running right above my head. And we're also, you can not only downloading this wherever you're finding this on iTunes or Stitcher or anywhere. We're also on YouTube, on Twitter, and all the hyperlinks are in the show notes. And it's probably easier. People used to click in links. I'll run through them. I could run through them and run through what the names of the pages are. But why don't you just check the hyperlinks? Because even on YouTube, which pretty much these mini-sodes are easier to produce than the full episodes when I actually have someone on Skype, I don't think I'll be able to do that. I think the only way you're going to get to see somebody is they're actually in this studio. And it's been a while since I've been in this studio. So Meg asked me, would I do this podcast if people didn't listen? And then I started asking myself, like, why do I do this? And, it's important if you're going to put any time and effort in anything, it's good to kind of refresh yourself or kind of take a step back and ask, why do I do this? Why do I do all this? And I think the secret is it's not about the podcast. It's really not. It's about relationships. And I use connections. Connections is like a surface thing. Like you make a connection where you see somebody you think you know. But when you have a relationship, you actually spend time with who you know, and you build on that. And I've noticed we've talked to a lot of people on this 100-plus episodes or shows of podcasts and 64 episodes and 64 and a half, the MiniSode. There's a lot of people that I've connected with throughout this journey that I've actually kind of grown away from. People that were part of the show for a short period of time that maybe I don't talk to them on the phone as much as I'd like to. And then there's folks that have gone beyond social media or just connecting through tweets or text messages or Facebook posts and on Facebook Messenger to actually share things and talk about things. And suddenly it's crazy, but I never assumed I'd have a plethora of so many fans and people. And there's cool that people that are into the show that I'd never met and like the show and its content. And I guess they like me because that's what you get. We were talking about authenticity before. That's pretty much what you get. And I started thinking about relationships. And one thing I just wanted to talk about and share with my audience is if you try really hard and think or put a lot of effort in thinking you're connecting with people because you're texting them all the time, or you're messaging them all the time, or you're tweeting them all the time, or you're texting. I think I already said that, but it doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about. You think you can build a relationship through those things. And the funny freaking thing is you can't. I mean, you can feel like there's something between you and someone else when you use social media to communicate with them. But honest to God, it doesn't happen unless you have a face-to-face conversation. I tell all the folks that are on the show that are remote, that get on Skype, I have to do video. I hate doing phone calls. I need to look at somebody when I talk to them, and I always have a lot of fun, even though on the videos you can't see them because I haven't figured out how to produce, to take a low-resolution, bad video Skype call and stick in this high-res studio image. It's still an opportunity I get to actually look to somebody when I talk. And I consider her a friend because I've actually shared a lot with her and she shared a lot with me, but simply we started connecting just simply through podcasting. But I actually met her in person, I think the first time I met with her, and her name's Annette Bone. The filler episode we put in about 2 weeks ago was a bonus episode. Annette Bone joined me. I can't remember the name of the episode. And she's a dancepreneur. She hosts a dancepreneuring podcast out of L.A., and she is flying in 2 weeks to go to the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Convention because she's speaking as well. And I'm so excited. This is her second time, and I really need to pick her brain. I've done hour-and-a-half long presentations for work, but to do an 8-minute presentation on something that I've never done before, but have a clear idea of what it is, I really have to do a lot of my homework. Is going to be a stretch, so I really want to use or at least utilize any feedback she can give me. But she asked me an interesting question on Facebook. She asked me a question to say, I think the messenger message was, that's weird, messenger message. The messenger message was, how does my show inspire you and help you? And she does an amazing, inspiring dancepreneuring podcast where she talks about how to take creativity and entrepreneurship and utilizing dance to advance your way of thinking. And she has choreographers and business people on, and she's got such an upbeat attitude, and you'd never think anything gets her down. I was so excited to have her on my show because she really shared a lot regarding her family, which she doesn't usually do on her show. And that's what I love about my show, because people actually share things that they don't usually share on their show. And that's how I assume I would get to know anybody in a conversation, right? If it's all on the surface, you don't really make a connection. But you really engage with a lot of people through social media and what have you, just on the surface. But in meeting Annette at the convention last year and then having a lot of dialogue, actually hopping on the phone with her last year after that, when I was deciding to change jobs, she was an amazing influence on just helping me understand my thought process on, at one point I wanted to stop doing what I do for a living that I built a whole career on and start a podcasting production studio and I mean, really pursuing entrepreneurship. And I'm glad I didn't. It could be something in the long term, but it wasn't really the right thing. I just was unhappy where I was and didn't want to do what I did anymore. So I think when she sent me this really simple message, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to respond to it today. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to sit on it. So that was, I think, Friday night. Saturday morning, woke up, took the laptop outside, sat on the back porch, and I started writing. And the thing is, I wrote nothing about her show. I just wrote simply about her. And to me, that was way more satisfying to tell someone how I feel about them and what they mean to me versus what their online identity or persona is. And I love the fact I could share that with her, and I could be honest with her and tell her how I felt about how she helped me through some difficult times, and I'm anxious to see her. And I've made relationships through this now community we have that some are kind of superficial. I mean, they're really simply about, hey, we've talked on the through Facebook posts or our Facebook page at the Dependent Independent Podcast page, and on Twitter, Dependent_Nick, and that's what we did. But I never really sat with them or talked with them or shared something when things were down. It's easy for podcasters to hop on a microphone and tell you how everything's hunky-dory, but no, man, last week was a terrible week of work. Today I got the shit kicked out of me at work. I mean, it was productive, but not what I expected. And I promise you, I'll tell you, honest to God, my audience listening and anyone watching on YouTube, I promise you I will always be myself on this show. And I have to do more of that, because now that I'm preparing for this presentation talking about authenticity, it is way more human to connect into and build a relationship when you get to know who that person is, what sets them off, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, what makes them hesitant, what makes them insecure. I'm not always happy when I do this show. I'm not always energetic. I mean, really, it's, hey man, I'm making a commitment one day a week for the next like 6 years to hit 200 episodes. Now there are ebbs and flows in there, and I get that, and that's the part of it. That's the choice. That's why I picked that goal. But when Annette asked me to offer her input, all I could do was talk about her because I consider her as a friend, and I know that I have a relationship with her, and I want to build on it. I can't wait till she comes here, and I hope there's not a scheduling conflict. There's stuff happening at work that I hope I don't get sidetracked, but she's going to get to meet my family. It would be awesome if I can get Annette here in the studio sitting right next to me, on camera right here where you can see her, I could talk to her, and she'd be in my house. That would be the tits. I'm sorry if I offended anybody, but I don't care. It's an explicit show. So it would be awesome if I could get her here. I can't wait to see her. I just don't want, there's people I connect with that, and in this whole thing that just we kind of fizzle away, but you really have to make a conscious effort. This thing has absolutely taught me. You really need to make a conscious effort to build relationships, to learn people, to share with people. Most people, when they build relationships or networks, they're there to take something away. Not me. I'm trying to give as much as I can, and hopefully in return someone offers me an olive branch of something that I could possibly utilize or take. And I don't think Annette Bone thought that she was giving that to me, but she totally teed me up at an opportunity to actually share that with her and tell her how I felt. So I ask you, if you have someone that you really want a relationship with, put the fucking phone down. Just call them up on the phone, hear their voice. Hear the affect in their voice. If they're nervous, if they're angry, if they're happy, if they're laughing, you can hear that. You can't get that in a bunch of words or 140 characters or less. And I'm telling you, I dove into social media in doing this. Even though I mentioned before, all the hyperlinks are in our the show notes. That becomes like the fail-safe on making connections. And I don't want this podcast to suddenly become a superficial substitute. Because when I talk to you, I'm talking to you. Yes, I am. Bob, Mary, Kathy, Joe, anyone who's out there listening to this, whether you're driving in your car, on your commute, a friend told you about it, you're binge listening to it, and suddenly you're getting up to this episode and you finally think that Nick's cracked. I'm talking to you. Even though this is a one-sided conversation, I connect with you, even though I'm just by myself on these minisodes. I get to do that every other week. And on top of that, meet new people, bring new people on. Everyone who I have on this podcast is someone I met through doing this podcast. And I can't wait to see how many people I get to connect with, but also with those connections, how many people become close friends and those that I build relationships with. And I want to do you guys a favor. I know these shows can be long, and these are snippets. I know in this day and age, they're like, everybody loses interest after 3 minutes, but we're hitting 15 minutes right now. I'm going to end this real quick. I think I'm really clear on what I wanted to share with you guys. Like I said, if you're a podcaster and you want to get involved, go to the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Convention and you're in South Jersey and you're listening to the show. I think you can go online at MAPCon, MAPCON. You can still sign up. You get your t-shirts. It's so much fun. It was overwhelming for me to go last year. If you're someone that has been on this show with me and you still listen and we haven't talked in a while, give me a ring. Let me know. I might reach out to you. And for those of you that I still am friends with and still share with, I thank you very much for the time you give me, especially you, Annette, and everyone, my family, friends that have allowed me to do this. In October, I've talked about this before, we will be doing the grand opening, me and my close podcaster and friend, someone who I consider a friend. She's unbelievable. I enjoy talking with her on the phone and hanging out with her. My friend Jess Brannis, who does the Drinks with Jess podcast, she and I are going to do a double podcast feature at the Vinyl Brewing Company in Hamilton. I can't wait for the grand opening. We're thinking like second, third week in October. As soon as we get the date set, we're going to start getting our marketing material out, stickers, everything. And the theme has something to do with tattoos. That's all I'm going to say. But if you got a tattoo, you may get on a microphone and have an opportunity to talk to the audience and share a story about that tattoo. Again, this is Nick G., the host of the Dependent Independent podcast. This is an enormous podcast I keep doing every week, so thank you for staying tuned in. And you can see all the hyperlinks to download the show and subscribe. Go ahead and rate the show. I haven't got a rating in a while. I've got them. People give me feedback, but go ahead and rate it. It makes me look good on iTunes. You can check that out. And the hyperlinks to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, however you listen to it. It's virtually impossible not to find the show on the internet. Nick G., MiniSode 64.5 of the Dependent Independent podcast. And I want to be your friend, but I am out.